Can everyone see my screen all right? Cool. All right, well, hello everyone. Hope you're all doing well. I am Nick Brandt, the project designer for the Certified group, and I'll be talking to you today a bit about requirements management. So some of you may be wondering, what exactly is requirements management? Well, requirements management is really the process of documenting, analyzing, tracing, prioritizing, and agreeing on product requirements. So there's really a lot there to unpack when you look at requirements management as a whole. But really, when you boil it down, the purpose of requirements management is really just to ensure that an organization is meeting the needs and expectations of both its customers, as well as its internal and external stakeholders. So when you look at a requirement itself, that is really just a capability to which a product outcome should conform. It really defines the what or the need, and not really the how or the implementation. Requirements are also long-living, meaning they remain with the project as long as that requirement is part of the product. And they act as somewhat of like an outline of your product. And you may be asking, how are requirements really different from issues? And one of the best ways that I can explain the difference is issues and MRs are really more methods of change, whereas requirements are what drive function. And additionally, issues in their corresponding MRs, are closed once they have been completed, versus a requirement actually persists or remains within a project. So that's, a very brief breakdown of what requirements management is, but now let's talk about how it comes into play with GitLab. So when I joined Certify, work had already been started to validate the problem of requirements management. So Catherine, Holly, and Mark had performed a series of generative interviews really to better understand the problems that a lot of these users are facing today. And some of these main problems are, current tools are clunky and dated. They're oftentimes overly complex, especially compared to some of the needs of some of the different organizations. But really the main issue is they don't integrate well with DevOps tools. So organizations will be managing requirements in one system, and then having to tie that together with their source code management that's done in another system. So there's a lot of it results in a lot of manual work as well as duplication of efforts to kind of tie those things together and show that a requirement is actually being met within your code. So it was very clear that there was an opportunity to provide a better experience for our users by having this as part of our product offering. And by providing them with a better integration with their existing tools, we can help to eliminate much of this manual work and duplication that's currently occurring. And in addition to a more seamless solution, this could also help organizations in eliminating the need for a lot of the costly alternatives that they're using today. Depending on the type of industry that an organization works in, though, they may have very different needs when it comes to requirements management. For example, regulated industries are those that must show compliance to government standards for their products. So some examples would be, manufacturing, healthcare, the financial sector, as well as like government. And their needs are oftentimes much more complex and require, a more feature-rich product before they can adopt something. To be able to show things like traceability, verification, as well as documentation. Unregulated industries, on the other hand, are those that do not have to abide by these strict guidelines or compliance standards, or don't really have a formal compliance structure that they need to follow. So many of their needs of these organizations can be met with some of the more basic functionalities of requirements management, and will be able to adopt something much sooner. So knowing that we want to work iteratively towards the ideal solution that can solve it for everyone, we are focusing our early efforts on solving the needs of more of these unregulated organizations first. And this will really provide us the ability to get something out sooner, which will help us to gain some additional learnings as we continue to iterate towards more of that ideal solution that will solve some of the more complex needs of the regulated industries. So for our first iteration of requirements management, we really focus on simply providing the ability to create and manage a list of requirements, as that itself was going to take a good amount of work for us to get out. One thing we were able to do was to leverage the issue object model, though, which helped reduce a good portion of this effort and gave us some quick wins when it came to development. And this MVC was actually released in 12.10. And I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the current state of this, just in case you haven't had a chance to check it out yet. So as you can see, we're within a project within GitLab, the planned project to be specific. And you notice over here on the left-hand sidebar, we have a new navigation item for requirements with just one item underneath it for a list. And within the main content area of the page, you'll notice we essentially have this listing of requirements here. And as I mentioned before, we kind of leveraged the issue object model to kind of get some quick wins and be able to develop something a bit quicker. So you'll notice it looks very much similar to what you see for like an issue list. However, like as we are kind of working through requirements management, we are trying to be cognizant of trying to balance, matching existing patterns that we have across our product with also trying to really tailor the experience for requirements management to make it the best experience for that. And, there's a couple examples I can point to, one being the unique identifier for requirements. So you'll notice that that's actually here at the prefix, or the forefront of the listing requirements. And the reason for this is today with many of the tools customers are using, they're used to seeing requirements like this, and oftentimes when they're communicating about requirements, they're actually referring to those by their ID instead of by their description or what they actually are. So it made a lot of sense to have that differentiation here, and also makes it a little bit more clear what you're looking at. Like when you land on this page, you know that you're not on an issue list at this point. An additional area that we're kind of straying from kind of an existing pattern is the creation of new requirements and the editing of requirements. So as you know, with issues, we currently, if you go to create a new issue, you're essentially taken to a separate page where you have quite a bit of information to fill out. Well, with requirements, at this point, we really only have one field, and that's the description of the requirement. So it doesn't really make sense for a user to go to a separate page in order to do that. So what we've done here is when you go to create a new requirement, you're essentially presented with an inline form where you can essentially describe a requirement. And then, once you fill that out, you can go ahead and hit create, and it goes ahead and populates it directly into that list without being directed anywhere else. You also notice that we've also presented a toast message here in the bottom left as additional affordance. And this will really be beneficial, especially like once there's sorting options in case, the requirement isn't going to be towards the top of the page. There's still that additional affordance to a user that the action was actually completed. So in addition to, inline creation, we also have inline editing. So if you need to make an adjustment to one of your requirements, you can simply hit the edit icon, make some change, and then it's automatically updated within your list. There's also, times when, a requirement may be deprioritized or it's decided that it won't be part of our product. And in those cases, it makes sense to be able to archive a requirement. And you'll notice on the far left right here, we have this new icon, which Jeremy helped create for archiving. And so a user can easily, select this, and it'll be moved over into this archive tab that we have available. And so that way there's still that history of the requirement in case you ever need to refer back to it, as well as if it ever is decided to prioritize this requirement, it can always be brought back by reopening. One additional consideration that I'll mention that we made sure to include was the creation of an empty state for requirements. So if you haven't had any requirements created and you go to this requirements tab, we wanted to give a little bit of context to what a requirement actually is. And so similar to issues and MRs with their empty states, we're also presenting the user with an empty state here just to provide that context as well as the ability to easily create a new requirement from that description as well. So as you'll notice, this is pretty lean for our first iteration, but it really kind of opens the door to start figuring out, what are the next major improvements that a user would really be looking for, and how can we meet some of those needs earlier instead of, starting with something large. We can kind of iterate towards an ideal solution. During the time that a lot of this work was being done, we also began conducting a series of 8 research sessions. And the goal of this was really to validate that the direction we were heading was in line with user expectations, as well as to capture any usability concerns and improvements that we can make. With the MVC being pretty lean, we were also able to take time during these sessions to really help inform the direction of requirements management. And by including some generative questions, as well as running through a card sort activity during the session, we were able to understand, what users would be looking for next, as well as how we could best solve some of their more pressing needs. So what's next for requirements management? We are currently working on adding filtering and sorting to the requirements listing, as that'll be very important for users to be able to effectively manage and view the requirements, as these can oftentimes be hundreds or even thousands of items within this list. In addition, we are also working to introduce traceability to be able to really verify that a requirement is being satisfied. And although there's still a good amount of work to be done with this, it adds a significant amount of value for users in being able to really complete that loop for a requirement and showing that it's actually being met. In addition to this work, I'm currently wrapping up the research sessions and I'll be working to distill the findings that are coming out of that. So I'll be creating any issues needed based on usability issues that we identify, as well as leveraging the insights and prioritization from users to really help inform some of the future work that we're doing for requirements management. And that's all I have for you today, but I'm sure I'll be following up here in the future as we continue to iterate on this product offering. Just want to mention, if you do have any questions or want to follow up with me, please don't hesitate to reach out. I've included both my Slack handle below, as well as our requirements management channel that we use for communication within Slack. But thanks for listening.